I'm here to talk to you about entheogenic herbalism. And for this next 30 minutes we have together, I just want you to really come out of your minds and start landing into your body. And if the music does turn on, that's really going to help facilitate just coming into your other senses. Because those other senses are really important modes of perception when it comes to medicine and interacting with the world, and especially the plant world. So I just want you to listen to my voice and start to feel into what inspired you. What inspired you to come here to Entheogenesis Australis 2022. And just feeling into what inspired this music. What inspired this talk. Because there is an ocean of being, a huge creative whirlpool that we can all access. That's very important when it comes to healing, because healing is an incredibly creative process. Creativity is one of the most renewable resources that we can access as humans, and it's a resource we need to tap into when we're dealing with medicine and healing. So not just listening to the music or listening to the rhythm, but listening to a deeper rhythm, to didgery, deep listening, to the place that inspires us. So also to the silence, to the gaps that are very dense and full and are birthing things. So as a good friend of mine who's in this room reminds me, we're all here because we're not all there. And if we're not all there are parts of us that are still birthing. There are parts of us that we are still imagining into existence each moment. So I ask you, what are you listening to? Are you listening to that deeper rhythm? What brought you here to EGA? You may have thought it came from your mind, that it's a really great career move. It's good study. Is that why you're really here? Or is there something deeper? So we cannot solve the problems of the world, or what we perceive the problems of the world to be, with the same minds that created those problems. So what are we to do? What are we to do with all those problems? And when we're dealing with medicine and sickness, there's a lot of problems. So I'm asking you to come into a different mode of perception. Because those answers in healing, they will not come from the top down. They are not going to filter down from the intellectuals, from the scientists. They're birthing out of each of us. They are rising up in a truly shamanic sense from the bottom up. Out of all of us, the punters, the people on the front line, the ground crew. That's where the healing's coming from, because we are really important nodes. We are just nails in the framework of the architecture of a huge temple that is our humanity. And as John Seed said yesterday, we're realizing that we're not the spiders in the web, we're just a strand of the web. And so there's an opportunity to relinquish our role as protagonists and to allow the background to come into the foreground. And for us to reimagine what health and sickness is. So this kind of understanding, this deep knowing that comes from inside of us, it's the kind of state that is awakened from an entheogenic experience. So if you just all think back to that first time you had mushrooms, or LSD, or some kind of psychedelic experience, and something was transformed inside you. There was a place that you arrived at that felt true and yours, and it was hard to explain. And this kind of truth is called gnosis. So it's an understanding that comes from experience. It's a truth that isn't learned from reading it or hearing it, but it comes from inside of us, and it's an accumulation of all the things we've been through. It's our truth. This is the kind of gnosis that we need to move forward in this world and redefine our health and to heal what we perceive those problems to be. Your healing, your gnosis. And the way that gnosis happens is by being informed from the outside world, being informed from your experiences. And so there's this permeability where you're letting the outside world touch you. You're letting the outside world move you. Just as music moves you, as art moves you, these plants are capable of moving you. And it's hard to say at which point the outside world becomes our inside world. So we're in this room and we're all breathing the same room, and it has light and it has a vibe and it has sound and it has constituents all through it. And it's the external room full of information yet to be digested. And then as we're breathing it in, for each of us, it's now surging through our bloodstream as these little pockets of information. And at another point, we have completely digested the room, and it's us. This realm of the external and the internal, the self and the other, the known and the unknown, this is the world of healing, and this is the world of entheogens. Because when we're healing, we are being asked to let go of something that we have identified ourselves to be, that's not working for us because we're sick. And so we're being asked to step from the known sickness into the unknown, which is our health. And we're imagining that into existence. So what are you listening to? What are you feeding yourself with? Because you're birthing your health each moment. So these times of big transition, like when there's health or sickness, is a time of initiation. Sickness is the ultimate initiator, because you have to let go of all that you know of your sickness and step into what you don't know, which is your health. And the herbs that deal with these big times of transitions, rites of passage, initiations, letting go of deep grief and accepting what is, these are the entheogens. This is their terrain. So they're liminal herbs that are in between the realms. They're gatekeepers, and they deal with boundaries. They deal with the immune system. They deal with the space that is between the self and the other. And we see that the entheogens appear at times of transition as their signature, as their doctrine of signatures. So in First Nations Australia, the acacia annua is used to smoke and smudge baby's earthside, one of our ultimate transitions. And then on the other end, as we pass over to the other side, to the great mystery through death, again the acacia is smoking and smudging people death's side. This is where we see entheogens out in the world, and what I'm going to show you over this next 20 minutes together is how the medicine of a plant does not require a PhD. The medicine of a plant is quite simple, and it's all to do with its role out there in the ether, out there on earth. And when we use a plant medicine, we are not just merging the plant's intelligence with our own, but there is alchemy, and this is called emergence. So emergence is when a new quality rises when two things are combined. So it's when the sum of all the parts, when the whole is greater than the sum of all those parts. So it's not just a mathematical equation, but something new has emerged, and this is what happens through healing. An example is when the protofungus and the algae came together to form the first plant. Who could have imagined that when hydrogen and oxygen combined together, they would form water? Who could have imagined that when billions of bacteria worked together in the human digestive tract, we would be able to digest food? Emergence is when the wisdom of an old growth forest utilizes the whole network of plants and fungus and bacteria as one stream of information. Emergence is when we gather in a room like this and learn, and then decide that we're going to act on behalf of the earth and protect it. So hello everybody, I'm Rachel Maree, and I'm a herbalist, and I'm here today to talk to you about entheogenic herbalism, a prescription of neurognostics. And I've traveled around the world and sat with different traditional cultures who use herbal medicine as their primary medicine, and they rely on herbal medicine as their only medicine. They have herbal medicine integrated into their culture, and I'm particularly interested in the different people that use entheogens and have entheogens as part of their apothecary, part of their medicine cabinet. And I want to share today a little bit about what I've learned from those cultures. So, can you change the slide? Just that one, thanks. So firstly, I'll just speak to you of a plant's intelligence, because they are incredibly intelligent. They would have no medicine if they weren't intelligent. So intelligence is the ability to sense one's environment, to process and integrate such perceptions, and to then decide how to behave. So plants are responding to their environment all the time in real time. I'll just give you an example of some of their intelligence. Plants are able to respond to sound. So through agricultural phonobiology, we can play sounds to plants and see how it affects their growth. And when these plants were played sounds of birds from rainforests, from their environment, it would enhance their growth. And when they're played sounds of predatory insects, it would increase their release of tannins or alkaloids in part of their defense. Plants respond to touch, so the sensitive plant can differentiate different forms of touch and even choose when to close or when to close off. It's been shown that the sensitive plant can then remember what that touch was for up to 40 days and can differentiate the different types of touch of what it will close and open to. Incredibly intelligent. Plants have evolved because they can't move so well. They've evolved modular bodies where they drop their limbs and regrow. Plants are able to smell, in a sense, smell, by speaking a terpene language, and it's the most widely spoken language on Earth. It crosses all of the kingdoms, the terpenes, and they are emitting vapors and diffusing them into the air and talking to other plants, warning other plants, warning people. Where when you brush past a basil, you can smell it, it's releasing a language, it's communicating with you. So this kind of communication is known as allelopathy. Allelopathy is when plants have chemical constituents that they can use for defense and also for allyship with other plants. And the allelopathic plants are known to release alkaloids, they're known to release different volatiles to protect themselves. And why they're so important to medicine is that we draw a lot of our medicine from the plants that are allelopathic. So it's like a like cures like. So the allelopathic plants are using these constituents for their defense system, for their immune system, and so are we. So it's not that complicated. And so how this all relates to herbal medicine is that all of the herbs are master chemists. Because they haven't been able to move, they have created a chemical lab inside of themselves that is their defense system and is their immune system. And this is where most of our medicine comes from. Most of the medicine in the Western world and our entheogens and our psychedelics are being inspired by and extracted from plants. So why would these plants be making entheogenic compounds? That's what I want to look into. Most of the entheogenic compounds that we're really interested in work on the serotonin system in the body. So I just wanted to share with you about what serotonin's doing in the ecosystem. Why are plants making serotonergic-like compounds? And so serotonin is present across all of the life forms. And in the plant world, it is used to regulate growth and in stress and defense responses. That specifically allows the root system, which is the neural network in plants. It's essentially their brain. It allows it to grow adaptively to stress. So plants are essentially upside down. Their minds or their brains are down in their root system, and their limbs are up in the air. And the serotonin the serotonergic compounds that are out in the ecosystem are their defense system, and it's a way that allows their root systems to grow more laterally, to reach out. And so the reason why this would be their form of defense is that there is no safety. in this world. I know we like to think there's safety and we like to make things safe, but there is no guarantee of safety out here on Earth. And so the way we protect ourselves is through creating adaptive responses so that we can perceive more of our environment, be more informed by our environment, grow our neural network, which is our brain, or for plants, their root system, so that in real time we have more options of how we're going to respond to whatever comes up. That's how things respond to stress, and that's how organisms keep themselves safe. So how this relates to medicine for us is that just like curious like how these serotonergic compounds are growing adaptive root systems for plants, is they are working on our minds and our nervous system so that we can grow adaptively. All of the entheogens are adaptogens. And more than that, they're diffusives. So diffusives are herbs that go really deep into one part of the body, and they always have an affinity to one part of the body, like an organ or a part of the body, like the liver or the kidney. And the entheogens are all diffusives or driver herbs for the mind and the nervous system. So what this means is that they permeate really deeply into that part of the body. And any therapy that you combine with them, or any plants that you combine with them safely, are going to penetrate more deeply into that part of the body. So we're talking about the mind and the nervous system, and we see that when entheogens are combined with therapy, that the therapy drives really deep into your nervous system. We see that when ayahuasca is combined with bobinsano or chiricsananga in a dieta, that those herbs drive so deeply into your being that they are said to become a part of you and will never leave. So really interesting to think of how entheogens might be combined with other herbs and other modalities so that they can act as hitchhikers and carry really deep into our minds and nervous systems. Each plant has mastered its environment, and by ingesting that plant, we are ingesting its intelligence of its environment. So what I mean by that is that a plant that lives out in the desert deeply, deeply understands dryness. And that is its medicine. It has mastered the dry conditions. And a plant like the mangrove that lives in the waters has mastered salinity and mastered wetness. So its intelligence is informed by its environment, and it becomes its function and its mastery, and that is its medicine for us. So how are we going to use these plants? And unlike any other herbal medicine, like turmeric or tulsi, you could just take it. But why is it that with the entheogens, more than ever, set and setting is so fundamentally important? That doesn't apply to any other herb in the apothecary. And that's because they're dealing with these realms of the known and the unknown. They're dealing with our very sense of what our boundaries are in our immune system. And so we are going to be taking in more of the outside world so that we can adapt to it, so that we can be informed by it. So really, more than ever, we need to understand the set and setting of what these herbs want to work in, what they're good at working in. And so if we look to our ancestors and also the living cultures of First Nations people across the world who still have a relationship with entheogens, they use entheogens in trance states. So what I mean by that is they use the plant alongside a hypnotic state that will bring their mind into theta waves so that they're more able to work with the realms of the subconscious. And if we're working with the realms of the subconscious, we need to allow ourselves to become enchanted. So can you allow yourself to be enchanted by the forest? And if you just follow me on this journey, the forest consciousness has always been connected with the scary, with fears. It's a place where monsters come from. It's a place where you wouldn't sleep. You'd want to clear the forest so that you can sleep safely. It's a place where dangers come from. And the forest is also a place where our medicine comes from. It's a place you go to collect your medicine. So the same place where our fears arrive from is the same place we go to for our medicine. This is the world of the entheogens, right at those boundaries between the known and the unknown. And when there's shadows in the forest, there's always going to be, when there's shadows for us in our life, it's always going to be a place that light doesn't get to. And if light doesn't get to it, it's going to be a place that disease can thrive, disease can grow. And the thing about shadows is that when you're dealing with them, you can never look at them front on. They'll always be behind you. So you need to use a modality that's not working so front on, face to face with your shadows, with your fears. And that's where the trance state comes in. You're able to allow the backdrop to come forward and the foreground to merge into the background. And you're working horizontally with all of your subconscious, with all of your fears. And so trance states induce these theta waves. It's like a waking REM, and it happens through dancing, it happens through drumming, it happens through shaking of the body, it happens through rhythmical movement. And if we look at how First Nations people have used entheogens, and our ancestors have used entheogens, it was in trance states. So trance states are hypnotizing, and they are deeply embodied, but they also expand what we perceive our body to be, so that we may take up more space and then protect that space. So if we were to look at a few herbs and a few entheogens and how they're used, I can speak to how it's changed over time. So mushrooms have been used all over the world, but I'm just going to look at how they're used in Oaxaca in Mexico, because that's where I went to experience mushrooms. And whilst back a long time ago, mushrooms were used with cacao in these all-night dances. There would have been a very big trance state by the fire, dancing, drinking cacao and mushrooms. That's not how they're used today in Oaxaca. So today they're used in a ceremony in a dark room. And there's lots of songs that are sung, but you sit in complete darkness. And that's because culture has always had to evolve and change, especially because of Christianity and because of the globalization of the world. There's been a pressure on traditional cultures that if they want to keep their practices alive at all, that they need to adapt and change. So now the ceremonies can look quite different, but there's still some of those elements with the singing that allow this like hours and hours of singing. And it was really important for me to sing in the ceremony. I was being asked to sing over and over to try to induce this trance-like state that allows the subconscious to come forward and be able to be accessed. So also, medicine is used fresh. So there were about 20 massive psilocybe cubensis mushrooms that were picked, and I did all of them, more mushrooms than I've ever eaten. I couldn't even finish the dose. And they're picked straight off the land. And so when medicine is fresh, it's informing you of the landscape that it's growing in. And that's really, really important. It's like a real-time communion with the external world that is relevant information that you need to know for your safety and your protection and your updates of the status of the world you live in. Another thing is that other plants are used. So the Ruta graveolens, the rue plant was used, and I was battered during the ceremony, and all of those vapors were cleansing me. And it was quite embodied. It was somatic, like batting herbs on yourself during a ceremony. And there were brugmansias all around, and they were not used in the ceremony because their energy was thought to be far too chaotic, but they were kept at the boundaries to protect the wilds and the mundane, to sort of mark the edges of the ceremony. The thing with healing is that it's totally non-linear. There's an aspect of going from that known state of the sickness you're dealing with and stepping into the unknown state of the health that you're calling in. And so it needs to be non-linear. And we shouldn't discredit or forget how powerful the mystical experience is and the magic and in the unknown of the mystical experience, that it's rated up there as the most powerful moments in your whole life. Up there with the death of a close family member or the birth of a baby is the entheogenic experiences. So we'll have a little look at Iboga, Tabanete Iboga from the Congo, from Cameroon and Gabon. And I'm just going to show you some photos of my time with some really big Iboga trees that you never get to see that big over here in Australia, growing in their most perfect conditions of constant rainfall and epic humidity. And so you use the root bark of the Iboga, and it's used in these ceremonies by the Bwiti in Gabon, and Bwiti has many different expressions. It's incredibly colorful. I just want to show you these images because they absolutely aren't using trance states. The sect that I was working with, we used possession trance, and we were taught how to hack into a trance state so that we could be possessed by spirit, so that spirit could heal us. And the way that I interpret that is that we are handing over our control back into our primal body so that our body can heal itself. And Steve spoke to that yesterday on his talk with MDMA, that we're just creating the conditions for healing to happen, and the body is self-healing. And that's what's happening with the trance states. So it's the rituals and the mode of using iboga is so paramount that you don't even need to use iboga for there to be healing. So some of the rituals will just be the dancing, the drumming, polyrhythmic drumming, and epic sessions with the whole community involved of all ages, and there can be healing happening from that. Iboga is really second to that. They think it's just a tool to enhance the trance state so that you can tap into the healing. And I'm just going to show you this little video. You can click play. And just so you can feel like some of the music. This is a normal night on iboga for the community. And the point I want to make here is that the use of iboga is so intrinsic to the whole culture of unity and the people here in Herbal, is that you couldn't separate the plant's intelligence and the use of iboga from the expression of the culture. It is a part of who they believe themselves to be. And when they're going through these rituals, they're reinstating their music, they're retelling their creation stories. The whole community comes together, the entire town is there. It's a really important part of their culture. Just the next one. Yeah. And this is something that happens with entheogens, is that with the rise and use of entheogens, there is the understanding of who we perceive ourselves to be and a celebration of who we perceive ourselves to be through our expression of culture. And these two things have always gone hand in hand. So we'll lastly just have a quick little look at peyote. Peyote's been used in lots of different ways, and it's maybe the oldest entheogen in the world. Today it's used in teepee ceremonies. Again, the whole community's there. It's an all-night session. Be staring into the fire, there'll be lots of drumming, trance-inducing drumming, there'll be lots of chanting. But this again has been an evolution of how peyote was used. At a point, peyote was used through the ghost dance, which was much more somatically embodied, and it was dancing outside in the night by the fire with the drumming to celebrate the life and death experience. But culture is always changing, culture is always moving, it's a lived experience. And that's just the note that I really want to leave this on, is that right now entheogenic use is rising again in our culture, and we are laying down new traditions, and we are rediscovering what culture means to us. And these two things will go hand in hand. As entheogens get more and more used and more accessible, we will be asking, who are we? Who are we celebrating ourselves to be? What are our rites of passage? What are our rituals? And our culture will become diverse, and our culture is becoming colourful, and it's something to celebrate, and it's a part of the medicine of these entheogens. You cannot separate that from the use of entheogens. It has always been that way. Entheogenic use inspires something. It's from that same place that music comes from, that art comes from, that same golden thread that brought you to this conference. Entheogens rise out of the creative whirlpool of Gaia, of Earth, and inform us and inspire us. And so I really want to envision a world where, as entheogen use becomes more accessible, it can be used in the setting it was designed for, through trance states, through music, through deeply somatic embodied experience, so that we can have that process of gnosis inside of us and solve what we believe the problems of the world are in our sickness and our health. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Rachel. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
We've probably got time for one question. We had a bit of a slow start this morning, so yep, you're quick and off the mark. Yeah, I'll just give you a mic so we can hear.
Thank you. First of all, that was phenomenal, so thank you so much. So I have a question in regards to grief. So my husband and I lost our only child to brain cancer recently, and we're searching for a way to integrate grieving in a more spiritual way so that we can continue that relationship with our child from a conscious parenting perspective. how could this be integrated potentially into that journey?
Sending so much love to you. I
Thank
say
you.
that grief is a way of loving something that we have to let go of, and that moment we fell in love with them, we were actually grieving their imminent loss that would happen. Entheogens, like any of the entheogens, but I would particularly say mushrooms, really help calm the nervous system and bring us into a place of acceptance with what has, because what they're all doing is putting us into a feeling body, and nothing's going to change or heal what happened, but where you want to focus on is being able to be in your full feeling body, in full embrace with what you've been through, with what your family's been through. And that's what the entheogens help. Any parts of you that are getting shut down from feeling because it's too painful, they'll incrementally open that back up. Because that's what healing is. It's being able to hold opposites in the same room, of the joy and love of something that was and the grief and pain of having to let it go. You need to be able to all be in the room at once with you being open. And that's what healing looks like. So that's what entheogens help with. You could look into mushrooms.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Rachel.